This last topic is optional, but I think you might get something out of it. I always like to bring it up in class when I have time, and it's about the Laffer curve. And it's our country has these periodic debates about whether we should raise taxes or lower taxes, and most people believe they're overtaxed personally, but they wouldn't mind seeing those richer people get taxed. And well, one of the problems with this is that if you tax the richer people too much, then they'll just quit doing what they do to make money, because if you're going to take it all away, then why bother? And you got to think, well, have you ever worked for a poor person? And so it's the richer people that tend to build the businesses and provide jobs and keep the economy going, or the people who want to get rich and are on the way up. So there is always a tension between should we tax more or tax less, and how does that affect the revenue pouring into the government? Well, this is an observation called the Laffer curve. Actually dates back to the 1300s, and it's a very simple concept, but seems to be so related to what we're doing that I like to cover it. Now, it's named for Art Laffer, Laffer, and he's an economist from my alma mater, University of Southern California. And back in the late 70s, he was able to explain this to people, and eventually it made its way to Ronald Reagan. And Reagan thought this was so brilliantly simple that he could explain it to people and communicate it. And of course, Reagan was very good at communicating things. And so when he got into office, he very quickly was able to get a tax cut through the Congress. But Reagan wasn't the first. John F. Kennedy argued for a tax cut back in the early 60s. And after he died, after he was assassinated, LBJ managed to get that tax cut through. And then later, George W. Bush got a tax cut in when he came into office. And what happened in all three times was that the economy picked up and people started paying more taxes. You can look it up. So when taxes were cut, tax revenues went up. How can that be? How is that possible? Shouldn't, if you raise taxes, you get more money in? If you lower taxes, you lose more money? Well, let's take a look at the Laffer curve. All right, so here's the idea. And by the way, no one knows exactly what the Laffer curve looks like. There just really is no practical way to figure it out. But let's call this axis the tax rate axis. And this is the tax revenue axis. In other words, the money we collect, the money the government collects from us people working, is influenced by the tax rate. All right. Now, the idea is to look at two extremes. And so suppose that there was no taxes, 0%. All right. How much money would the government bring in from taxing people? Well, obviously $0. If you don't tax them, you won't get any money. Okay. What if you had a tax rate of 100%? How much tax revenue would the government bring in? Now, this assumes that it's a free society, and so that you have a choice about whether you work or not. But if everything you did in your work got taken away from you, everything you did, all the money you earned was taken away from you and you got $0, would you work if it was a free society? I don't think so. Okay. And so if the tax rate was 100%, no one would work, would they? And if no one worked, then there'd be no economic transactions going on. There'd be no tax revenue. Now, it's not possible to collect a tax rate and earn negative revenue. And so there is a curve that connects these 2 points. And it has to go up into here. And like I said, no one knows what that curve looks like, except that it has to go up and then come back down. Because somewhere in between, the government is bringing in tax revenue. So it goes up and it comes down. And at some point, there's a tax rate which is optimum. If optimum to you is maximizing government revenue, and there are people who would argue against that. Well, you don't want to grow government too big. But if that was the goal, to bring in the most tax dollars into government, then you would want to somehow figure out what that tax rate is. And I don't mean to say it's 50%. It could be anywhere in here. And so, but somewhere there's an optimum tax rate. And so what happens on the right side? If you raise the taxes, then the revenue goes down. So on this side, we are overtaxed. And on the left side, if you lower taxes, the tax revenue goes down. We are undertaxed. Now again, this is in the perspective of maximizing revenue to the government. And like I said, there are people who would say this is not good. We need to be down here, otherwise government has too much power over us. All right, well, I don't want to get into that argument. I just want to look at it in terms of tax revenue. So it seems counterintuitive to say if you raise taxes, the government's going to take in less money. But at least three times in history, John F. Kennedy is president, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, at the beginning of his presidency. All lowered taxes, and guess what? The revenue went up. The revenue went up. So in all three times, we were on this side of the curve. We were overtaxed. And you might think of it this way: if less money is being taken away from you, then that allows you to invest more back into the economy, and then you're going to be more inspired to work more. And so that's what happens when we lower taxes. Very often, the economy will take off, and there'll be more economic activity, and then there'll be more people paying taxes, and so the revenue will go up. Now, we're not sure where that is, but at one point in this country, or maybe several times, but at one point, and I think it was in the early 60s, the tax rate for the wealthy people was at 90%. 90% of everything a rich person earned was taken by the government. What would you do if the government took 90% of what you made? Even if you were rich, would you be inspired to earn a lot more? And so that was cut, and those people started producing again. Ronald Reagan cut it from 70% to 28%, I believe, on the rich, on the wealthy. And the economy just went through the roof. And so, and also, of course, under those circumstances, when you're overtaxed, you also want to lower taxes on the middle class people as well. Everybody pays taxes. If you're overtaxed, you want to lower taxes. That raises revenue. So anyway, this is a debate that constantly goes on in our country, and it would probably be easy to believe that if you didn't pay taxes, if your income was low enough, you didn't pay taxes, then it wouldn't bother you if they raised the taxes, right? And you probably say, well, those other people are undertaxed. And but at some point, if you earn enough money, you might think, I'm overtaxed. And so here we are. Here's the Laffer curve, and it is a purely mathematical argument about policy here. And so it's kind of related to the stuff we've been looking at. All right, well, we'll leave it at that and move on to a new section. We're going to look at graphing polynomial functions.